So the question is, how do you get ready to watch a movie like Blade Runner? It's one of the most popular, famous movies of all time. It's a very slow movie to contemporary standards, although in 1982 it was considered this sort of fast driving action movie. It deals with really difficult philosophical conversations. It deals with very challenging social and economic and political and cultural situations. And stylistically, the visual style of the film, the literary design of the film, the sound of the film are all, again, really complicated. The way I want to try to walk us through this, besides the previous lecture thinking about the Android questions and problems, is kind of going back to the beginning. And my goal here is to help you guys out. So if you watch a film that seems complicated or strange, drop back to the basic elements of film form. So here we're just going to really talk about literary design, and then move into thinking about sound design very quickly, and then finally talk about cinematography and visual design. I'm not really going to hit editing too much here, as a way to sort of map out the film for us. So the first thing that you know about Blade Runner is it's almost more about a world than characters living in a story. Okay, so the world of Blade Runner, we need to understand some things. First of all, there are these things called replicants, these androids. They're made by companies as slaves. And the idea is that Earth has been pretty much decimated by world wars. World War Terminus, it's called in the novel that inspires the film. And very few people are left behind. The ones who are left behind are pretty much the poor, or the downtrodden, or the ill in some way. Everyone else is living on a beautiful planet elsewhere. And when you move to another planet, you get a replicant, you get a slave. Okay, and we hear the people talk about these replicants, these androids. Some are made for sex, some are made to be secretaries, some are made to be workers, etc. So those ideas already, the world we're living in is potentially unethical, potentially dangerous, potentially damaging. Okay. The other thing about the world is we don't know. We're in San Francisco, we think, and there are very few white people in San Francisco, in this world. The background seems predominantly Asian or Latino, which is really interesting. It's a very different world. And one of the opening shots of the film is our main character, Deckard, getting some noodles at like a fast food joint, not a fast food joint, like a street joint, which is, we hear multiple different languages spoken, and he is by far the minority figure here, surrounded by a bunch of basically non-white figures. So that's interesting. The world, the cultural world of the film is sort of provocative and thoughtful in terms of what America looks like. Okay, how do we start breaking down the story itself? The story is it's almost more of a detective film noir, Sherlock Holmes sort of story than a science fiction story. We're basically looking at a guy whose job it is to hunt down androids who have come back to Earth. It's illegal to have androids on Earth, basically. So his job is to work for the police department, to hunt down and retire, right? A word that would imply their jobs that are being retired from, murder, kill, eradicate these folks. Okay, so our main character, Deckard, is this sort of detective, this bounty hunter, who's called a Blade Runner. Side note, worst movie title of all time. I mean, I guess that sounds kind of like sexy and exciting, Blade Runner. Just cheesy as all hell. And it's kind of, the movie itself is worthy of a much better name, I think. But anyways, so we have Deckard, and of course, like that we've seen in so many other detective stories, he's going to get involved with a mystery he's sort of exploring. So he's probably going to fall in love with somebody. He's probably going to get involved with a woman who might or might not be good for him. He might or might not be good for her, etc. And then we have a guy he kind of works with called Gaff, played by Edward James Olmos. And Gaff is actually a really weird figure in this movie. The actor himself is Latino, but I'm not sure what ethnicity he's supposed to be in the film. He's certainly supposed to be non-Caucasian. He has a disability. He walks with a cane. He's sort of a cop, maybe. He's a Blade Runner, maybe. We're not quite sure what his job is. You might be able to figure out better than I can. I've seen this movie tons of times, and I still don't quite know what role he plays in the world. What role he plays in the story is pretty cool. He does a couple of very surprising things. One is he's always around to talk to Deckard, our main character, about androids. And it almost seems like he's an angel, a supernatural figure that's coming down, giving advice on how to do the job. You're never quite sure if Gaff hates Deckard, appreciates Deckard, is Deckard's friend. It's a very strange relationship. Because the other thing Gaff does is he creates origami animals and leaves them throughout the film. So when you're watching the film, please watch out for these origami creatures that he leaves everywhere. These beautiful, fragile little animals he makes out of paper. One of them's a guy, a man, and you'll see very clearly it's meant to be a man. And they're sort of trickled out throughout the movie. So what are those things all about? And what is Gaff doing here? Please pay attention to the unicorn. I know that probably sounds ridiculous. There's a specific origami unicorn that's made near the end of the film that I think is a very big clue to what's going on in the movie. Okay, then we have a guy named Roy Batty. Roy Crazy, right? To be batty, to be crazy. Roy is sort of the lead android. He's leading these folks back home to Earth. And his goal is to meet his maker, to sort of try to get more life. The way it works, androids have 4 years of life and then they die. And Roy and his friends are like, yeah, we don't want to die. So let's meet the guy who runs this corporation and see if we can get some more life. That, of course, works out really well in the movie. It does not for anybody involved. But Roy is very interesting because he's the anti-Deckard. He's a free thinker. He doesn't have a boss. He's trying to lead people. He's not really trying to make money. And he seems to be in love. He seems to be, in some ways, very ethical, very caring. And he does something that's sort of similar to Gaff. Gaff leaves these origami creatures everywhere. Roy Batty gives us these beautiful, poetic, philosophical speeches. And there's 3 big ones. One is about eyes. You'll recognize it. You're literally going to be in a store where you can buy eyes, right? So he has a speech about eyes. There's this beautiful line about, if you could only see what I've seen with your eyes. And he's talking to the guy who literally made his eyes. He's an android and his eyes were created. But metaphorically, if you think about what's going on there, like I might like to talk to my dad's dead, but I would love to have a conversation with him, you know, if you were around. Like, if you could see the world that I've seen with the eyes you made in me, not just biological, right? You helped me see the world a certain way. You forced me to see the world a certain way. Let me try to show you what I've seen with the gaze, with the sight, with the perspective that you created in me. And hopefully you can understand how that could be a beautiful interaction or a really disgusting, dangerous interaction. You taught me how to be violent. You taught me how to be angry. You taught me how to not care about myself. Let me show you the world I've seen with the eyes you've made in me. Right? So these sort of metaphors we could see throughout Roy's character. Really interesting. We have the eye speech, and then we have a speech about gods and creators, as you would expect, a Frankenstein sort of situation. And then he gives a speech about what he's seen to Deckard at the end of the film. And there's it's one of the most sort of well-known speeches from the film. So those literary elements of the speech that Roy gives, almost Shakespearean, really beautiful, cool stuff. Okay, then we move to our 3 female leads. And what's interesting about our 3 female leads are they're all androids. One of the questions I want you to ask are there any human females in this film? Or are all the females androids? And if so, what the hell is going on here? Is that okay? Is that dangerous? Is that stupid? Is that misogynistic? Is that feminist? Is that trying to make us think about the construction of femininity in our world and who makes those rules? Keep in mind, 2 films from now, we're going to watch a movie about 2 dudes that basically make a woman. It's almost like, what was that film from the 80s, Weird Science or something like that, where 2 sort of geeky guys in high school create the perfect woman. So we're looking at just to throw it out there, we're looking at why this is dangerous and why this is maybe really scary and how that's a metaphor for maybe the ways in which our identities work in culture. That we create rules about what's okay to act like and what's not okay to act like, and then we police each other in those rules. And there are certainly very powerful gendered rules that we have that should be broken, of course, but not should be broken, but could be broken, of course. So we have Zora. She's made as an erotic dancer, and watch those speeches with her. She's wildly intelligent. And look, if you look at what Deckard does when Deckard interviews Zora, some very problematic stuff going on. Very interesting. Pris, she seems to be manipulative. Everything she does is to try to get attention from men, to control them, to manipulate them. She doesn't seem to have any respect for humans, which is interesting. If humans are, to throw it out there, if we read human as white male, then something weird is going on here inside the movies. And then there's Rachel, who's a secretary who does not know that she's an android. And you'll figure that out very quickly in the movie. And then she figures out that her whole life is a lie. She has had implanted memories, memories that aren't her own, that are given to her, and she has to negotiate that. So those are some of the really big character and idea moments in the literary design. A couple more things about literary design. First is there's a very uncomfortable, strange love scene. It was filmed and written as a love scene. To me and to other viewers, it comes off as a sexual abuse scene, as a rape scene. If the movie is about what makes us real, what makes us human, and are we just being implanted with memories? Are we just being programmed to talk a certain way? Watch that scene, because the man is literally programming the woman to say and do things. And it's very, well, I'll just say interesting, and I'll let you deal with it. Okay, so that's sort of literary design. Let's start talking very quickly. Sound design. There's three basic types of music we're going to hear. One is very digital, synthetic, made through synthesizers sound, right? And it's very apparent from the opening sounds of the film that that's going on. And that's going to get juxtaposed with what you would expect in an old 1930s detective story, this bluesy jazz, sax, sad. I always think of like Sad Rainy Night when I hear some of the jazz music in here. More blues than jazz, really. And that gets counterposed against this piano music once in a while. So what's going on with those three styles of music in the film, and what are they making us think and feel as they play from one to the next? Okay, the last one, and probably the most important. Blade Runner is made by Ridley Scott, who you probably know, Alien, Legend, Blade Runner, and then he's made a host of contemporary movies. And he's a very visual thinker. I think he's much more interested in the painting he makes in the film than the characters and the moments and all that jazz. So let's some things to look for in terms of cinematography and visual design. The first is the opening shot of the movie. It is very much trying to show you this world. It's this huge, wide panning shot where we're watching this car fly through the city. We're really getting a sense of the seemingly apocalyptic landscape of this city. There are humans here, but man, is it very industrial, and there's flames thrown up everywhere as if we're in hell. And there's these really loud, deep, synthetic undertones being blasted at us as we sort of fly through the city. And then we get blasted with advertising and women's faces, and specifically these eyes. So it's almost like the film's telling us, man, the eye, it's almost like Psycho. We're looking back at you. Or we'll watch a film called Cabin in the Woods that's all about being watched or watching other people. So that seems to be an important part of the film. And maybe even playing back to the android question, what does it mean to look at a replication of yourself, a replication of your species? Or more importantly, what happens when something not human sees you, or something you have determined to not be human sees you, and they're clearly acting like a person? So what does that do to your perspective, etc.? Okay. The other thing about visual design is the background world. As I mentioned before, in literary design, we're going to see many Asians and some Latino, and what seems to be, how do I say this, disenfranchised people. The people in the background of this film seem to be groping for the day's food, the next day's living. They seem to be poverty-stricken. They seem to be almost like mice in terms of just tons of lives scattering around looking for sustenance. So it's a very unhappy urban landscape, and you'll see that. It's very anonymous. As one of my professors said when I was getting my PhD, we talked about this movie a lot, And he said that he thought the background characters were the movie. He said that everything that's being fought for, everything that's being talked about, is the very thing that destroyed their lives. So it's pretty interesting, something to think about in terms of how the visual of the film, the background of the film is sort of set up. Okay, I mentioned the origami and the origami animals, the origami unicorn. Definitely look for those. Those shots are typically going to be close-up shots. And if this were a contemporary fantasy movie, or maybe a Game of Thrones episode, you could imagine this huge, great, beautiful, weird dragon or something. But no, we get, in our futuristic film, a piece of paper folded into a unicorn. That's our fantasy. So there's lots of reasons behind that hopefully you'll sink your teeth into. Lastly, I'm sorry, two more things. One, the animals in the film. We actually get some snakes and birds throughout the movie. They're supposed to be fake. They're supposed to be robot birds, a robot owl, a robot snake, etc. And what does that mean? That even our animal life is becoming replicated. For those of you who might be familiar with the novel that spawned this movie, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, there are almost no animals left in that movie, or that story. And to show that you have an animal, a real animal, and you can take care of it, was the apex of human empathy. You could prove that you're a human being and that you are empathetic by having an animal you care for. Now, truly last thing. This is a weird movie because it's about testing people to see if they're human. And you can replace that word human with testing people to see if they're rich, testing people to see if they went to the right school, testing people to see if they're heterosexual, homosexual, ad infinitum, the whole list of different sexualities you can be. Why would you ever test somebody about their identity? What are the reasons for that? What happens if you think you have a test that can prove something about someone else? The film seems to really question what we do with tests and how dangerous they can be for power. They can give the tester a great deal of power and the testee no power. And what happens, this is what the film is asking us, I think, if the person taking the test would fail the test. You ever wondered that about your professors? Like, hey, do they remember any of the stuff they're talking about? How would they be able to, I sort of hope you asked the question, God, man, if Tony had to write this paper, would he be able to do it? I haven't talked about this all semester, but I write all the time. I have articles that I'm always writing, and I'm happy to talk about what my current research is about. If you guys are interested, throw me an email or something. But I kind of don't feel comfortable making my students write papers if I'm not also writing papers. I feel like that's just wrong. But if you hopefully get the logic right, so the person in power doesn't have to do the thing the person who doesn't have power has to do. And that to me has always felt wrong and off and strange. And the film amplifies that. The other side of that is the end of the movie. There's a very strange sequence where Roy Batty looks like Jesus, a God figure, and he gives himself stigmata, the sort of the wounds of the cross. He's holding a pigeon or a dove, sort of the symbol of the Christian God's divine grace, and he's surrounded by all this light, and he seems to be saving people. And that moment, I think, is endlessly interesting, strange, and haunting, and it's followed by the big reveal. I don't want to give it away now, and I'm not going to do a post lecture, so I can jump into your discussions and talk about this, or you guys can muse about what I'm referring to right now. But the last bit of origami tells you something very important about the movie. And if you've seen the sequel to Blade Runner 2049, I think it came out a couple years ago, last year maybe, it ignores this moment. It actually pretends it didn't happen and takes the story in a very different direction. But the original Blade Runner, or the Blade Runner, the final cut, the movie I'm asking you to watch, has this moment that tells us something very important that should make us rethink the entire film. Okay, guys, hopefully this has been helpful, give you some handholds on how to sort of walk through the film. I am sure that you will find many other things to think about and talk about as you go through.